Okay, welcome everybody to the Family Addiction webinar. This is called Hope in Recovery, hope for depression, hope in addiction, hope where there's mental health struggles that affect family members. And, you know, the times are tough, especially around COVID, right? It's been difficult, more difficult than usual. The ability to connect when we're isolated in our home is just been hard when we're not able to get out as much as we were used to. So we're grateful and we are honored to be with 5 individuals who will share their hearts, their experiences. There's going to be a lot of vulnerability. Many of you that are going to be on for maybe the first time in learning about addiction, this is going to be pretty raw. And it's going to be not like a meeting you've probably seen before. There's going to be some personal things shared so that they can impart to you truly what they have learned and what they feel. We are grateful that you're here. Renaissance Ranch is a Christian treatment center. That's where we come from. Our higher power we call our Heavenly Father and our Savior Jesus Christ, but we are not trying to convert anybody. Those of you who come on, whether you're Buddhist, black or white, or have no religion or whatever, it's fine with us. We just are glad that you're here and hope that you will find some healing with us, you know, all together. Before we get going, we'd like to start with a word of prayer. And we're excited to have Russ, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Of course. Our dear kind Heavenly Father, bow our heads before you this evening as a group of brothers and sisters tonight. And we ask, Father, that your Spirit and your blessing will be here with us tonight, reside with us, and reside with those who stand in need of comfort this evening. We ask a blessing on those of us that will speak, that we can speak from a place of truth and honesty, vulnerability, in efforts to be a better assistance, Father, and to better do your work. We express our gratitude, Father, that we're alive, that we get to be here, that we get to enjoy relationships with each other, with our families, coworkers, whatever it may be. Just have gratitude in our hearts this evening. Thank you again. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Russ. Sure appreciate it. We've got a bunch jumping on, and so just so excited about this. Now, those of you who are on the webinar, there's going to be question and answers at the end. So we want you to be present. We want you to be engaged and look for the speakers that really resonate and that cause you to ponder an issue or a question. Write your question out in the chat feature as the questions come up. Don't wait until the end. What we find in webinars and firesides, that the question and answer at the end is absolutely as impactful, sometimes more impactful than the webinar or the fireside itself. And so we really want you to engage. We want you to write out questions. You can wait to write out questions till the end, yes, but we'd love you just to, as they come to mind, write them out in the chat feature. Hun, why don't you share a little bit about how to do that for those that don't know how to do the chat feature?
Okay, some of you, I'm sure this might be first time for some of you on a webinar. Just know that you don't have to worry about your video or your audio, but it would be cool to take notes so that when we get to that Q&A at the end, we would love to hear your voice and hear your questions. And all of the panelists that you can see on your screen tonight, they'll be able to see those questions as they're coming in as well. And so we're all going to help with that. And you've got right here people with decades of addiction, experience. So it's a great opportunity to ask those things. And Lane is, I know that he works at the treatment center, answering questions with family members. He's very good at answering questions about insurance, or how do I motivate my loved one for treatment, things like that. And just encourage you to take notes if you can. And we're just so grateful that you're here. I did want to share. There should be a little chat somewhere, usually at the bottom of your screen. It'll say chat. You can click on that and you'll type your question, and you can actually type it privately to either one of the panelists or just to everybody. And that would be great. I would like to share.
I was going to say, just so you know, this is Recovery Mom, and she is doing podcasts and just excited. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
It's a group effort. Our goal is to try to get out family resources for families that are impacted by addiction and mental health issues. And it's called Addiction Recovery Mom. And we're just blasting out resource tips. We put out our family classes on there, our podcasts that are rolling out, just all the information we can think of that might be helpful. And then if you can, if you know anybody that's struggling, just feel free to share that, because they're all free, and they're open to our classes. We have 4 that are open to the community and the public for everyone. And we have classes that are taught from a spouse perspective. It's nice to go to a recovery meeting if you're a spouse and you're dealing with addiction within your marriage or your partnership. It's really nice to go to a group where the facilitators, that's their situation. So it's a really good connection. We have parents that have, I know Rick and I do a Wednesday night, and we have another Tuesday night with the Nelsons. And that
come from a parent
perspective. We have a women's only meeting. We are adding a class for blended families in a few weeks. We're so excited that Lindsay and her husband are going to head that up. It's going to be great. There's a lot of need for blended families to have those resources. And then we're starting a class for couples only that struggle with addiction and pornography or sex addiction. And that's a really, that's a tough issue right now with the internet. So we're excited about our classes. Feel free to share them with anybody and everybody. And if you ever have a question, feel free to reach out to Christine at renaissanceranch.com. I wanted to share just a little bit of the research. I'm actually in grad school right now in a research class and focusing on addiction recovery for families. And there's been so much research that shows like the number one thing that we can do, best thing we can do, is start talking with those family members while the loved ones are in treatment, educating on the addiction and how to support effectively. And family members also need support. So research results that the higher number of support individuals have, and this is evidence-based research, so it's duplicatable. The higher number of supports individuals have, the more likely they will be to maintain abstinence, whereas the fewer supports, the more likely relapse will occur. Individuals stay abstinent longer in positive supportive relationships. And there was another study, huge study done over 3 decades of research in the context of drug and alcohol addiction, where the theorists evidence indicated that family members' interactions with the person abusing substances can reinforce their substance abusing behavior. Numerous studies demonstrate the family needs to be involved in treatment as much as the substance abusing individual. It's a family illness for generations sometimes. Partners living with individuals with substance dependence issues present with as many psychosocial difficulties as the substance dependent person. A couple's experience of distress can be both a precursor to and a risk for continued substance abuse within a relationship. Even when, these are all research studies, even when an individual with a couple has started recovery from alcohol or drug dependence, couple conflict can precipitate a relapse. Relatedly, research has found that including the partner in therapy is predictive of successful treatment. So we really want to encourage the family members to start getting involved, getting educated. We don't want to be that trigger that keeps that cycle going and going. Our next webinar in June 2nd, they're always the first Wednesday every 3 months, quarterly. We will have a marriage and family therapist on talking about the importance of couple and family therapy. We want to get you kind of hooked up with those resources. We also have, if your loved one comes to treatment, at least at our center and hopefully at most centers, request that if you're a couple or even a parent or whatever, request wherever possible, when it's ready, when the timing's right, to start working on those relationships, those interactions.
Through therapy.
Yes, through therapy. So that's pretty much all I wanted to share.
Yeah, what it made me think of is the importance of having family member involvement in recovery. The best thing that we can do as family members is to work on our own recovery. We are so passionate about that's why we have 5 different classes every week.
Soon 7.
And they're all free.
Yeah.
And soon to have 7.
Deanna will cover more of that. She's our
Yep.
rock star family member tonight. And stay tuned because we saved the best for last. So stay tuned for Deanna.
Okay, so let's get after this. Suicide, as you look at the statistics, have jumped dramatically, not just in youth, but all across the spectrum. Young kids is up over 28%, young adults over 31%, and on and on. A lot of times, addiction and suicide a lot of times go hand in hand because it's a mental illness. Other times it doesn't. I'm just really grateful to have Lisa Anne Garner here. She is an expert on this. She's got a PowerPoint and some powerful things that will be helpful in how to deal with what is called suicidal ideation. Lisa's been educating students and parents and communities about suicide awareness and prevention for many, many years.
9 years.
She looks young. She looks like she's 20, but she's really 59. I'm kidding. I mean, but she has got a lot of experience, and we're grateful to have her here and to be able to chat with you. She's counseled with many students one-on-one specifically about suicidal ideation. And so grateful and are honored to be able to, Lisa, have you with us. If you would like to unmute, and then you can take over. So sure appreciate you coming.
Great, thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen for my presentation today. We want view, present. Okay, so hopefully you can all see. I can't see you, but I know that you can see me. And I'm grateful to be here tonight to be able to share this very important information. I know it can be sensitive and sometimes difficult to talk about this, but what I'm going to teach you tonight is a simple technique called QPR. And it is so valuable, and really how we can prevent suicide is through awareness. So the more we know, the more people know this information and are able to help support those that are struggling, that's how we can actually help prevent suicide. Okay, so I'd like to start off with this introductory video so that you can learn a little bit more of what we're going to talk about tonight.
Research shows that the odds of surviving a heart attack in a public place are 10 times greater in regions where thousands of ordinary citizens are trained in CPR. It's called bystander rescue. When someone shows signs of experiencing cardiac arrest, the response of nearby friends, family, or coworkers is critical. The effective use of CPR doubles or triples one's chances of surviving a heart attack. Like CPR, QPR is an emergency intervention for someone experiencing a life-threatening crisis. QPR is easy to learn and easy to remember, but it takes courage to overcome our fears about reaching out to help someone who may be considering suicide. Research also shows that where QPR is widely taught, suicide attempts and deaths decrease. Just like CPR, QPR requires quick, bold, and informed action. Because suicide, like heart attacks, remains a rare event, we must train hundreds to save one, thousands to save hundreds, and millions to save thousands. There is an old Welsh saying, "No great misery goes unspoken." When we have a toothache, we tell people. We don't hide our pain. But because of the stigma and taboo around the word suicide, many people considering suicide don't speak plainly about their suffering. They fear our rejection. They fear that if they say something, we will ridicule them or make fun of them. As a result, people thinking about suicide often use indirect language. They hint at what they're thinking of doing. They send us coded messages, and they suffer in silence. Called suicide warning signs, QPR training teaches you how to recognize these warning signs, quickly decode them, and then question the person in an informed and compassionate manner to learn if they are considering suicide. Just as talking about physical pain helps diminish it, talking about suicide with someone willing and able to listen reduces psychological pain almost immediately. Trained QPR gatekeepers are merchants of hope, and hope helps prevent suicide. Millions of people have now been trained in QPR. Rigorous independent research studies support QPR as effective, and thousands of personal stories assure us that QPR is saving lives. When you use QPR, not everyone will be suicidal. Some people are simply stressed to the breaking point, but they still need help you can give. Please note that you cannot put the idea of suicide into someone's mind. People are either thinking about suicide or they're not. The fear of putting the idea of suicide into someone's head is a myth that keeps us from acting when we should do just the opposite. QPR is a universal intervention for people in pain, whether they're thinking about suicide or not. While it takes a special courage to overcome our fears, we will teach you how to ask about suicide and to offer hope through listening. Listening is the power tool that restores hope in the hopeless. We know you can do this, and we will show you how. Preventing suicide. It's what people do.
Great. Okay, so I love that video. I feel like it's such a great introduction on really what QPR is and what it's about. And I'm excited to give you these tools this evening. Due to time, typically I like to have more discussion and interaction, and I'm not going to do that tonight because I really want to inform you of the meat of this information and how QPR can be beneficial for you in your life and those that you interact with. And I want to be cognizant of time. We have a lot of wonderful speakers tonight. So let's get into QPR. Now, my presentation does say in school because I'm a school counselor and I teach teenagers about this, but this is applicable regardless if we're in school or not. So QPR it's not a form of counseling or treatment. It's positive interaction. And so it's really what anybody can do, which is why it is so great also to teach this to youth, because it is something that they're able to do with their peers and those that they interact with. So our objective is to recognize someone at risk of suicide. So we'll talk about some warning signs, increase knowledge of intervention skills. So kind of give you that confidence of what you can do as a family or a friend, and then know how to refer someone to get help. Now, this is a difficult topic to discuss, and many people don't feel comfortable talking about this with others. So there's three things that can really help you when having this discussion with someone. Being open, of course, we always like to say non-judgmental. Listen and validate feelings. So you want to make sure that you have enough time. If you're going to ask the question, we're going to get into that with Q, then you need to be willing to listen to the answer. And then create a sense of connectedness with you and the person that you are talking with. So who is a gatekeeper? A gatekeeper is really all of us. And so we always like to say that suicide is everyone's business. So who needs to know QPR? Well, all of us. That's why we're here tonight. So I just like to mention this one scenario just to kind of give you an idea of like who could be a gatekeeper. So let's look at the as a friend one. So as a friend, you observe your friend's heavy drinking at a party and overhear their conversation about ending it all. You also know that he was asked to resign at work after an allegation. The friend offers you his favorite guitar as you head out the door from the party. So in this scenario, there are several key identifiers in there that we would identify as warning signs. So kind of keep that scenario in the back of your mind as we go through and you're learning more of this information. It's about a teacher. Okay, so I think it's important to start off with myths and facts because there are quite a few myths that we like to debunk. So the first one is no one can stop a suicide. It is inevitable. If that were true, we would not be here tonight learning about this important information. And so this is the fact that kind of debunks that. If a young person in a crisis gets the help they need, they will probably never be suicidal again. That right there is hope. I love that. Myth. Confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. And we just saw in the video where they had identified that as a myth. And so asking someone directly about suicidal intent actually lowers anxiety, opens up communication and the risk of an impulsive act. So what it does is it makes the person feel more comfortable talking to you about it because you've just opened up the door by asking the question. Only experts can prevent suicide. Again, if that were true, we wouldn't be doing this tonight, right? So this is everybody's business and we all need to learn this information. Suicide prevention is, yep, everybody's business. So suicidal young people keep their plans to themselves. Fact, most suicidal people communicate their intent sometime during the week preceding their attempt. That's something that we can identify as a warning sign. Those who talk about suicide don't do it. That is definitely a myth. People who talk about suicide may try or even complete an act of self-destruction. Once a person decides to complete suicide, there is nothing anyone can do to stop it. Thankfully, that is a myth. Okay, suicide is the most preventable kind of death and almost any positive action may save a life. I love that because I feel like that brings a lot of hope. If a suicidal youth tells a friend, the friend will access help. Wish that was true. Most young people do not tell an adult. And that's what we're trying to change through this awareness of teaching young people. And when I teach this to students, I encourage them to actually go home and teach this information to their parents because their parents need to learn too. Okay. All right. This is our second video, our second and last video for tonight. Here we go. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go.
It may be hard to imagine, but according to the World Health Organization, over 800,000 people die each year by suicide. That is more people than are killed in all the wars and homicides combined. Of these deaths each year, more than 40,000 are Americans. That is one death by suicide every 13 minutes. Suicide affects every region of the world and is the third highest cause of death for people aged 15 to 44. And for every life lost, another 25 people will attempt suicide, often causing serious medical injury or lifelong disability. Today, the greatest loss of life is among working-aged men, 35 to 65 years old. Men of all races and ethnicities are at higher risk. And from the very young to the very old, millions of Americans think seriously about suicide for days, weeks, and even years. Thinking seriously about suicide is itself a kind of misery index, a sign that something is terribly wrong and needs attention. Most often, what needs attention and treatment is clinical depression, a medical condition that is now the leading cause of disability in the world. In America alone, there are an estimated 15 million sufferers. Most of us are touched by suicide. Some of us have lost family members, loved ones, friends, schoolmates, or colleagues. None of us escapes the loss of people we admire and respect, whether they are people we know or are much-loved musicians, artists, and entertainers. If you have lost someone close to you to suicide, then you already know the considerable cost, the tears and awful pain of loss. And if you are one of the millions who have thought seriously about suicide, then you already know just how lonely and terrible it is to suffer alone. Depression, anxiety, substance abuse, bipolar, and thought disorders like schizophrenia all contribute great risk for suicidality. Yet most people suffering from a mental illness do not kill themselves. They get help, they find a way, and they recover to live full and productive lives. And if recovery is possible, that means suicide is preventable. Thankfully, the world is changing. We understand mental illness. We understand suicide. And we know that treatment saves lives. Right now, our teachers don't teach us about depression and suicide. And our faith leaders often struggle to talk openly about these topics. Too often, doctors can't talk to their patients about suicide, even patients who are sitting in their offices planning how to end their lives, perhaps by overdosing on the medication being prescribed to them. The world remains dangerously ignorant about suicide. So to save lives, we must bring the subject out of the shadows. Effective treatment would save thousands of lives around the world. But we must learn to talk comfortably about suicide, and we need your help to start the conversation. Join us in this fight, a fight to save lives. Preventing suicide, it's what people do.
Okay, that video really stressed the scope of suicide. So I just want to go over some general statistics so that you can understand why we put so much emphasis in learning about awareness. And I have some general statistics for the United States and then some for Utah. Glad to have those of you from outside of Utah, but you'll maybe learn a little bit more about our state with some of these statistics. So let's look at a few of these. This is the general United States. It's the 10th leading cause of death in the US for all ages. Every day, 123 Americans die by suicide. Depression affects 20 to 25% of Americans ages 18 and older in a given year. And suicide takes the lives of over almost about 45,000 Americans every year. Let's see, this is important. Only half of all Americans experiencing an episode of major depression receive treatment. So that's only half. Now, 80 to 90% of people that seek treatment for depression are treated successfully using therapy and or medication, which is actually really high percentage. And so that's why we encourage those that are suffering from depression to get treatment. And then let's see, an estimated 250,000 of people each year become suicide survivors. Utah, unfortunately, is typically in the top 10. Now, this is the data from 2017, but we don't fluctuate very much. I think right now we're ranked about the same, maybe 6th or 7th. And you can see in the Western United States, we're typically pretty high, and they are doing some some research trying to identify if maybe altitude or some other reasons as to why our area tends to always have such a high rate. So the blue line on here are Utah males, and the red line underneath are males in the United States. So you can see that that Utah is higher than the national average. Below it, the yellow is females in Utah, with the purple being females within the United States. Again, also higher than the national average. I think one thing to note here, it is the leading cause of death for ages 15 to 24. But look at that 25 to 44-year-old age bracket. It's the second leading, and then kind of incremental as the age increases, with 45 to 54-year-olds being the fourth leading cause of death, and so on. So definitely a major concern. This is specific to Utah. So about 600 Utahns die from suicide per year. Males have a significantly higher age-adjusted suicide rate compared to females. We'll look at a bar graph in a second. And then Utah adults age 25 to 64 had the highest rate of suicide per 100,000 population. And then, of course, with a lot of rural areas in Utah, a lot of people own firearms, that being 49% of the common method of suicide death. So we do a lot of firearm awareness as well in trying to encourage families to put those in safes and keep them out of arm's reach. So this just basically is showing you the green is male, the blue is female. Look at that, males are 3 times more likely to die by suicide. Hospitalizations and emergency room visits are higher amongst females. That is typically because females will take pills in which, if they are able to get treatment, typically can recover from that. And then here's a breakdown with our age group. So looking at our youth, young adults, and then older adults. So we can see that still males, it's a lot higher than females, and it increases with age and then decreases in the 65 and older population, but still really high in comparison. So definitely a concern. We also want to make sure that everyone is aware about populations that are at higher risk for suicide. Our lesbian, gay, and bisexual kids are 3 times more likely than straight kids to attempt suicide at some point in their life. LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to make suicide attempts. 41% of trans adults say that they have attempted suicide. It's pretty high. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual young people who come from families that reject them are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide. And then every time an LGBTQ person is a victim of physical or verbal harassment or abuse, they are 2.5 times more likely to hurt themselves. So very, very important to be aware that these individuals are at a greater risk. Okay, we love good news. So most people who experience suicidal ideation do not go on to die by suicide. I think that is so important for all of us to understand, and that we can make a difference. Some things that we teach that we like for parents to be aware is reducing lethal means. So whether that's guns or having pills or any other means of harm in the home, to reduce that by either removing it or locking it up. Increased education, and then providing mental health services to those that are struggling. So I'm going to bypass that school one. Okay, so let's get into the meat of clues and warning signs. Okay, the more clues and signs observed, the greater the risk. So we always take all signs seriously. So we have something in Utah called the Safe UT app. And it's an app that students and parents can download, in which they can chat, they can put in a text, or they can put in a tip. And I am the person at our school that receives those tips. And every single tip I take seriously, follow through with it. And if it ends up not being any big deal, then fantastic. But we've done our due diligence in following up with that. Okay, so warning signs can come in many different forms. So it can be the way someone is talking. It could be a life event or something situational that's going on, a change in mood, or a change in behavior. Okay, so some risk factors are if someone is dealing with depression, has had a previous suicide attempt, has talked about suicide, has a plan. Substance abuse is a risk factor, and then knows someone, either a friend or a family member, that has made a suicide attempt. Okay, so when we talk about verbal, there is two types. There is direct and indirect. Now, direct is going to be just that. It's going to be somebody saying, I've decided to kill myself. I am going to end it all. I wish I were dead. So it's very obvious at what the person is saying, that they want to end their own life. Okay, so remember direct. And then indirect is a little bit harder to identify because it's implying. So I just want out. I'm tired. I can't go on anymore. I don't want to be around much longer. Pretty soon you won't have to worry about me. Okay, so those are your indirect verbal cues. Okay, behavior. So changes in behavior. So sometimes we'll see students, their academics just take a nosedive, or they stop coming to school. They stop wanting to be involved in something that they loved, like maybe they love soccer and then they don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. Giving away prized possessions is really interesting. And I had a fellow coworker, this happened to them with a student that had actually already graduated, and they came back and they were actually doing the gratitude thing where they had expressed, oh, thank you so much for helping me. And at the time, the counselor didn't realize that was happening. But giving away things that are really, really important is a warning sign. Destructive behavior, truancy, running away. Okay, so all of these behavioral clues. Situational clues are things that just happen in our lives. So maybe a loss of job, divorce, someone has passed away. For teenagers, a best friend has moved, or they broke up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, being expelled from school, even being embarrassed or humiliated in front of their peers. Okay, so these are all situational things that can really trigger the onset of being impulsive. Some other related clues can be a disappointment or rejection. Whoops. There we go. Okay. Increased apathy, and then physical symptoms as well. Okay, and these are just things that are more acute or kind of that may need some very urgent interventions. So not sleeping well, been up several nights, suffering delusions, alcohol intoxication, extreme anxiety, ruminating about the same thing over and over and can't seem to calm down. And so these are things that are preventing someone from being able to function in their everyday life. So those are going to need immediate intervention. Okay, so we're getting to the Q in QPR, which is asking the question. Now, this can be uncomfortable for a lot of people, and building confidence really in asking the question is key here. Okay, so just a few things is make sure that you are in a private setting when you're talking to someone about suicide. Make sure you're giving yourself enough time to be able to have this conversation. And then it does say if they're reluctant, kind of be persistent. You need to give them confidence to know that you're being sincere and that you really care about them. Okay, so when asking the Q, the big question, I just encourage people to find out what's comfortable for you. Now, when we talked about the direct and indirect warning signs, the same goes for your questioning. So you can ask in a direct or an indirect way. Now, I'm more of an indirect kind of gal. And so instead of, well, we'll talk about the less direct. So that's kind of typically what I like. And you can say something like, have you been unhappy lately? I noticed you've been struggling. What's been going on in your life? Have you wished that you could go to sleep and never wake up? Right. So these are all implying, and they're indirect. You're not coming out with the question. So for those of you that are more of a direct kind of person and you feel comfortable saying, have you ever thought about ending your life? Have you ever had suicidal thoughts? So you can come right out and say it. It's okay. We've learned that you're not going to make things worse by asking that question. The important thing is that you ask the question, not so much about how you ask it, but you do need to find a way that's going to be comfortable for you so that you are willing to ask the question. And you might be surprised how people respond. And what I find in my experience in counseling with youth is that more often they're honest in their answer, because you just opened up the door, you asked the question, and they're more apt to answer it in a sincere way. Now, if you don't feel comfortable asking the question, find someone who can. So that is important. So if you're worried about someone, you can reach out to resources, and we'll get onto that referral piece. Okay, just check my time here. I'm almost out of time. So I'm going to speed up here just for a second. Okay, so the P is persuade. So this is the part where you're going to encourage the person to get help. So you can ask a question like, oh, does anyone else know about this? Or if it's a young person, do your parents know? Or if it's an adult, does anyone else know? Does your spouse know? Okay, and so you're trying to also persuade them to be willing to get some help. Would you be willing to call a counselor, or I'll go with you to meet with so-and-so? Or okay, so and providing resources is really going to be the key here, because in that persuasion piece, you need to provide almost, a direction for them to go. Okay. Now these are kind of in the school setting, so we're going to bypass some of that. Persuasion works best when you focus on healthy solutions, not on the suicide solution. Accept the person's reality of pain, but offer alternatives. Show respect, collaborate with the person, and assure them of ongoing support, and offer hope. Okay. Now, not everybody believes that they can be helped, so you may have to do a little bit more, right? So the R is refer. Okay, so a QPR it's such a basic thing, but if you just remember, you're going to question, you're going to persuade them to get help, to talk to someone, and then R is refer. You're going to offer some resources. So make sure you have in your local area, wherever you live, a hotline. There's a national hotline here in Utah. There's the Safe UT. There's Uni up at the University of Utah. So make sure that you are aware of some resources in your area that you can kind of, pull out of your toolbox to be able to offer to those that you are talking to and supporting. Here is a picture of the Safe UT app. And so you can download this and you can see that there are several features on there where you can just, if you're worried about someone and you just are not sure what to do, you can just call. This is a 24-hour crisis worker that you can talk to. If you don't want to talk on the phone, then the start a chat is texting. Okay, the submitted tip is kind of typical for more like our school setting, but we do have parents that will submit a tip if they're concerned about one of their children's friends. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. I'm going to unshare right now so that I can see others, and that you have this basic understanding of how QPR. I often think of CPR and how CPR saves lives in that, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Well, QPR saves lives, but in a different way. And it's a very personal way, as well, as you are showing love and support to those that are struggling. And grateful to be able to share this information. And please, if you have any questions about anything tonight, feel free to put that in for the Q&A.
Thank you, Lisa. That was incredible.
Thanks, Lisa.
The one thing that really hit me is when you said you're not going to make it worse by asking the question. Many times we don't want to ask the question, think it'll make it worse, or they'll give my ideas, and it won't. I love the QPR: question, persuade, and refer. Well done. Thank you. Also, again, those who came in a little later, the question and answers will be after we get done with all the speakers, and you can go to the chat feature and put in questions right now if you want, and we'll get them and address them after the speakers. So again, Lisa, thank you so much. That was awesome. Hey, our next speaker is a man that I've known and respected for a long time. He's one of our own. He is a Ranch alumni. He is a recovering addict. He's lived through that dark abyss where there's not a lot of hope, if any, and he struggled back. He understands addiction from a personal perspective, and he is a father. He's a husband. He's a social worker that works there at the ranch. So those of you that are on the call that have a loved one in the ranch right now, Russ is one of the counselors that works with him. You'll feel his love in his heart. And it takes an addict to heal an addict. And he has fought the battle and is now in long-term recovery. He's been in the field of addiction for over 10 years. And he feels it a privilege to be in this sacred work. So without further ado, let's turn some time over to Russ Bird. Russ?
Appreciate it, Rick. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Wow. Let me start out by introducing myself, that I'm Russ, and I'm an alcoholic in recovery. First off, I want to say thank you, Lisa, for presenting on such a big community issue, such a big national issue, worldwide even, that it is important to get that education on it. And I just appreciate that as an advocate of mental health, which I'll get into a little bit from a personal perspective, like Rick said. For this webinar tonight, the message that I want to convey is that of hope for the addicted. And so I think the best way that I could be useful tonight is to share my story with that. Sitting here kind of thinking about and trying to feel the direction that I should go with that, it's going to be darn near impossible not to talk about my family a little bit. And so I want to get into that, but I also want to acknowledge that if you showed up tonight to this webinar, you either showed up, number one, probably to support somebody, or that you're reaching out for help yourself. Either way, I just want to honor that, acknowledge that, and that I appreciate you showing up. Like I said, I'm in recovery, and so know some dark times. I know that in those dark times that I did not feel connected. I felt isolated. I think that wherever I've looked with research, with data, not that I do that all the time, but a little bit over the last year with COVID, that a lack of connection has really spiked a lot of mental health issues, addiction being one of them. And so I think that this is just an important platform and an important thing to happen in our community. So I'm grateful to be part of it. My story, let's get to that a little bit. From Utah County, grew up there, and if I could just sum up, my childhood, my teenage years, I think that I was given pretty much every opportunity and given everything that I could want as a maturing adolescent, and had all these opportunities and privileges. When I was 15 years old, I had some friends in school. Who were, being the bad boys club and had some alcohol, right? And was there one night and someone asked me if I wanted to have a drink of alcohol, and I was like, yep, without a thought. There was no forethought there. I think that's maybe a trait that gives me an addictive mindset. So again, I know that when I was in my addiction, the last place I'd be seen is at a webinar at 7 o'clock at night with other family members. This is the last place I'd be. That wasn't on the agenda. If there is anybody who's struggling with addiction themselves and you did show up, geez, good job, like good freaking job. And I want to share some stuff that maybe will be helpful for family members as well as they're dealing with maybe the person who is in active addiction. And so back to my story, in essence, a switch got flipped. It's like there's some neurochemistry stuff that's going on up here with someone with an addicted brain where all of a sudden whatever substance they are addicted to becomes on the same level as necessary as food, as water, as air. And that was progressive for me. It wasn't right after that first drink. It was 4, 5, 6 years down the road. But I can tell you that happened, that it did progress to that point. And it started with that first drink at 15 years old. Go through high school and I have some consequences and kind of go down this path of what drugs and alcohol can do. My job is not to educate people on what drugs and alcohol can do to us. I think we all know that on some level. If not, go watch a movie, like that's not really the message that I need to carry tonight. I want to carry some of that hope though. I want to carry some of that hope that when things get dark, just going to speak for me. When things got dark for me, I was 22 years old and had been living out of a car that I owned, and that car got impounded, and everything that I owned was in that car. Impound lot, downtown Salt Lake, middle of winter, 2008, 2009. And I know, as I recall, my parents hadn't heard from me in a couple months. And I remember I called my mom and just said, hey mom, I haven't heard from you. I'm alive and I really need some help. I really need some help. Things had gotten pretty bad at that point for me, on the outside, but also on the inside too, and how I was feeling about myself and the direction my life was going. I wish I could just tell you that everything was smooth sailing from there. It wasn't. But my mom came and picked me up. I remember talking with her shortly thereafter as we're trying to figure out a game plan, and I'm trying to figure out a game plan because I can't imagine life without drugs and alcohol at that point. That sounded miserable. It sounded really, really miserable. And I remember my mom telling me, she's like, I don't know how to help you. And I think that was like a really honest comment from my mom. She's like, I don't know how to help you. And recovery does this funny thing, how we start to put pieces back together later on. It was a really inspiration that she had, because she helped not just my mom, my dad, my siblings, my extended family, the community around me, helped me get into this place called Renaissance Ranch. Really cool spot, in case you're wondering. I'm a little biased because I work there now, but had a really good treatment experience there. You know, the morning that my family presented me with the idea of going to treatment, I remember kind of like coming to, you know, like kind of waking up in a haze and seeing my whole family in my basement and just thinking, oh crap, like here it comes. And I was right. And, you know, it's kind of funny to laugh at now in retrospect. In the moment, it was not a funny thing. It wasn't. You know, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was a life or death situation for me, and didn't possess the skill and the wherewithal to really like grasp what was going on. But I was desperate. I know that I was in a lot of pain, and so timing was very critical. And I believe that there were inspired forces in the timing of that intervention from my family. I think you know, with mental health as a whole, that one of the best components is a community, a support community. So through this treatment experience for drugs and alcohol, for me, I began to develop a community around me. Began to develop you know, it was a brotherhood. That's kind of what I was introduced to, is this brotherhood concept of other dudes like me who I didn't believe. I believed they existed, but I didn't believe they could be sober. I didn't believe that people like me could actually be sober. You know, I'd hear someone say, well, you know, I've been sober 2 years, I've been sober 20 years, whatever. And I'd be like, okay, then you're not like me, because that's not a possibility for me. That's not real. It's not reality. Gosh, I'm grateful for those people today who shared their experience, strength, and hope, because it started to shift. It started to shift through, you know, a week sober, 2 weeks sober, going through withdrawals, sleepless nights, you know, the guilt and the shame bubbling to the surface that I'd run from for years, you know, those feelings and those emotions. That's kind of why I drank and used, I think, was to numb out a lot of emotion. I don't know if that makes sense. That's like that could probably be like an hour talk, you know, on the emotional aspects of addiction. But, you know, kind of started to grasp some hope after a few weeks of sobriety. It didn't happen right away. I think that's important, that for me, if anything, it got a little worse before it got a lot better. And a little worse, I mean, for those first few weeks. And I don't want to sugarcoat anything. If you're seeking help for a loved one or anything like that, that it's going to be dang hard work. It's going to be dang hard. In fact, maybe one of the harder things I've done in my life, getting through that first, oh my gosh, and it's always so dark before the dawn. And one of the essential components for my recovery, just speaking for Russ, has been the 12 steps. 12 steps, I believe, is kind of the backbone of Renaissance Ranch and the approach that we take. And it can come in different forms through the LDS Church ARP program, Alcoholics Anonymous. But the 12 steps is where I found my connection and found my solution. You know, and began to build a relationship with the God that I'm pretty cool with today. Him and I get along, and we're friends, and he's in my corner. and he'll go snowboarding with me, and he'll go to the gym with me, and he'll hang out with my wife and my daughter with me, and reside in my home. It's a pretty crazy thing to think, when I was living out of that car in Salt Lake City, that something like that would be possible. I'm here to tell you that it was for me, and didn't think it was. I was dead wrong. That early sobriety time, though, if you're supporting a loved one or anything, gosh, I don't want to say treat them like kid gloves, but like, I just remember I had a job for 4 months, 5 months, and I thought someone should have like thrown a parade for me, like, just look at me, I have this job for 5 months. It was a big deal. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a big deal because I was unable to do that, but normal people do that on their own all the time, but those little things of relearning life was so crucial. It's like I got sober and had a crutch. I was walking with a crutch, and it was just difficult to relearn life, I can say, because drugs and alcohol had been that crutch, for so long, to use that analogy. But so, gosh, I'm so grateful that I get to be, I was pretty apart from my family throughout that addiction, and for the years preceding ever seeking treatment or anything like that. I have a little sister who, her and I, she shares that disease with me, that disease of addiction, and has been sober actually longer than me, and in a lot of ways paved the way for me to get sober, and was an example. I can tell you that I definitely had some of that older brother shame going on when my little sister got sober before me, and I'm so grateful for that today, though. We get to share in a lot of really cool things, and celebrations, and it's just checking time real quick. I think I got another couple minutes. I think it's really profound, just to remember that I can't do this deal on my own. If you have a loved one who is addicted, and they tell you that they can do it on their own, maybe they can. I guess I can't say that, but probably not. We need help. We need support. These family groups and the brother and sisterhood that we have at Renaissance Ranch is a great way to find that support and tap into that. I've seen, and that's just been my experience. It's a really cool thing to be a part of, recovery. Really cool thing. Extremely grateful to the Dixons that I got asked to speak tonight. I appreciate that so much. I'm really looking forward to hearing from my other brother and sisters they're sharing tonight as well. God bless. I look forward to answering any questions, answering any further through the Q&A portion of the webinar. But again, grateful so much. Thank you so much for letting me be here. And with that, I'll pass the torch. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Russ.
That was beautiful. And as you lost your car, it's winter, all your stuff's in it. It seems that until the pain of the consequence is greater than the pain of recovery, we don't want to go into recovery. And so sometimes the tragedy, sometimes the consequences are the very thing that is needed for our loving addicts to say, you know what, I do need some help. The thing that's interesting is that your story is not unique. I've heard it many times, but it just rang true when you says, with me, I didn't think I could quit. That's just not something that I could do. Maybe this guy or that guy, they can, but that they're not like me. I can't quit. Well, they need help, and they can. And I look at you now where you've been, and now you're not just sober, but you're giving back. Your darkest hours, your darkest abyss has been your greatest light to help others. So Russ, my hat's off to you. Thank you, brother.
I'm so proud
Awesome.
of you for becoming a social worker.
Yes, sir.
That is like awesome. And the men love you. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, brother.
Mhm.
Okay, our next speaker is incredible. Lindsay Allred. She's going to be talking on hope for the hopeless. And if there's anybody that can talk about that, it's Lindsay. Here's a young lady that has come back from a struggle with addiction as well. It was so difficult that she'll talk maybe a little bit about this. She had her kids taken away from her for a period of time. And you guys, that's gripping for any mother, but that shows you the power of addiction, that it is a brain disease. It takes away our will and our control. Lindsay is now in long-term recovery. She's a wife, a mother of 6 children in her blended family, a counselor, again, a woman in long-term recovery. And she's blessed with 10 years in this industry and working in different positions. She's here to spread hope for the hopeless, because there's some of you on this call that are feeling a little hopeless. Hopefully, you can listen to Lindsay and get inside her heart. She also participates in our weekly classes, and her husband will be starting in just a few weeks another class with blended family focus. So we love you, Lindsay, and we'll turn the time over to you, sister.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. Hi, everybody out there on the online world, in the Zoom world. I'm Lindsay. I am a woman in long-term recovery. And by recovery and addiction, I'm talking like all the addictions, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, relationship addiction, probably first and foremost, codependency, all of it. So yes, I've been around the block a few times. And what I wanted to do tonight is I wanted to do something a little bit differently. Normally I just share my story. I start, from start to finish, where it all started and where I am now. And I'm going to do a little bit of that, but I wanted to touch on like a few principles and a few stories that kind of taught me those principles in recovery. And I wanted to paint a picture first. I want to paint this picture, and I want you to imagine it was 11 years ago. There was and I'm probably going to cry sharing this part, but there was an 18-month-old, 2-year-old little girl and a 3-year-old little boy without their mother. And they were living with their grandma, and they had a pretty great life. They did a lot of great things. Their grandma was really good to them. But they knew something was wrong, and they missed their mom. Their grandma had this excellent idea to get these balloons. And so she brought home these balloons. They loved balloons at the time. She gave them these balloons, and she walked them out in the backyard, and she said, "We're going to let these balloons go for your mom. So hopefully she will come back soon." And I still have that picture. I was going through pictures the other day, and I saw the pictures of them holding those balloons. And now imagine a father. He has one little girl. That's it. He's in his 50s. He, is pretty successful. He's married. He has a stepdaughter. He has some stepkids, and he has a stepdaughter that's living with him. And, overall, his life's pretty great. He's struggled. He came from very little, but he worked very hard to get to where he was at. And his one girl that he was so excited to have was in addiction and was actually in jail at the time. And that little girl called her dad and was so angry, was just livid, and just projected all her anger onto him. You know, how could you make me come to treatment? How could you make me do this? I hate it here. As soon as I get out, I'm going to run away and I'm not coming back, and you'll never hear from me again. I hate you. And then imagine a woman, 25 years old, had been living in her addiction for quite some time, living out of her car with her boyfriend, lost her kids for a couple years, was sitting in jail, and in a empty room with nobody there. Didn't believe she was worthy, didn't believe anybody cared anymore. Had been raised to believe that there was a God, but didn't think he existed. And if he did exist, he definitely wouldn't want to hear from her because she had made too many mistakes. And as you can tell, I'm sure, that's where I was at about 11 years ago. I was that woman in that jail cell, and I wanted to reach out, and I wanted to pray, and I didn't know what else to do. I had hit this bottom, and I was in this dark, lonely corner, and didn't think anybody cared, didn't know what to do, was so lost and so broken. I just didn't want to be there anymore. But I also didn't really want to go either. I didn't want to take my life. I knew that I had things to live for. And I was raised in the LDS church, and I learned these primary songs. And this one particular primary song came into my head, and it was a child's prayer. Heavenly Father, are you really there? And you hear and answer every child's prayer. Some say that heaven is far away, but I feel it close around me as I pray. And I would just sing that song in my head. And that was the prayer that I prayed. And that was enough. You know, I think, especially, I think if we're raised in church or in a certain culture, we think that praying and has to look a certain way. And I just don't believe that. I feel like Heavenly Father wants to hear us no matter what. He wants to know what's really going on with us. And so that was the start of, you know, my recovery. Jail was actually a really great experience. And that was one thing I kind of wanted to point out is, you know, for a long time, my dad would kind of rescue me and save me and bail me out of jail and pay my rent and do these things to keep my life pretty comfortable. And as long as my life was comfortable, I wasn't really willing to change. And so he learned about boundaries. He became a missionary in the LDS 12-step program, probably like 7 or 8 years before I even got arrested. I mean, I was probably barely in my addiction. And how cool is that? I mean, that God works like that. He put him in that spot so he could have an opportunity to start working on himself and to work the steps way before I was even ready to go into treatment and work on myself. And I just think that's so cool that that's how the Lord works. And that was an important piece of my recovery too, and change, was that my dad was willing to do his work and my family members were willing to do their work. We were all doing our own program. And so he started holding these boundaries. He said, you know, no more rent, no more phone, no more this. I'm not bailing you out of jail. So I ended up in jail. And lo and behold, even with my call to my dad that, you know, I hate you, I'm going to run away, I'm never coming back. Even with that, I think it was like the very next day or maybe 2 days later, I called him back and I told him what had happened in the last 24 to 48 hours. And to me, it was a miracle. All of a sudden, I knew that God lived, that I was exactly where I needed to be, and that he loved me. And I told my dad these things. And this guy that I had met in LDS 12-step meetings had shown up to do a meeting in the jail. And it was just what I needed. I feel like that the Lord puts people in our path when we need them and when we're ready to hear them. And I wouldn't have heard that message and I wouldn't have received that testimony had my dad continue to do what he was doing, which was before that, he probably would have bailed me out of jail and I would have missed out on that whole opportunity. Another thing I want to talk about is, sorry, I lost my train of thought now, but was prayer, and the importance of prayer. During that time, my dad and my mom and other family members were praying and praying and praying in my behalf. And he would tell me stories of, walking up and down the beach. We lived in California, and he would drive down to the beach to get away from everybody. And he would just pour his heart out, praying and praying to save his one and only daughter. And that was going for all my family members. And he kept feeling like, yes, like, not yet, not yet. And then one day in particular, he told me that he felt so much peace, and he knew that the Lord heard him and was willing to accept what he was asking. But then things got worse before they got better, like Russ had stated. A lot of times that seems to happen in recovery. And so he held these boundaries and, did all these things. And this was prior to my jail stint. So I'm kind of going backwards, but I ended up losing everything. I went to jail, and on the outside, it looked worse. So it looked like it was getting worse, but actually the Lord was refining and breaking my heart just enough so I was willing to listen to him and to hear him, and to change. And another story for prayer was when I was graduating treatment. And I really wanted this missionary. We had lots of missionaries when I was in jail. It was the coolest thing. So if anybody has a loved one that might be going to jail, don't just let them go to jail, because it actually is a pretty great thing. So I had like this group of missionaries, probably 10 of them, that would come different days to do different classes. And I could remember all their names, and I really wanted them to come to graduation, to my treatment graduation. But there was one in particular, I could not remember his name. I didn't know how to get a hold of him. And for me, it was really important that he was there, because they meant so much to me, and they literally saved my life. And still to this day, I just love them more than anything. And I attribute so much of my recovery to them. And so I prayed. I decided, I'm like, well, what the heck? They tell us to pray for things that are important to us. So I'm going to try it. I was early in recovery, and I prayed, and, instantly, like in the middle of the prayer, his full name came into my mind. And I was able to invite him to the treatment graduation, which was so cool. And it was such a stepping stone, just to have a testimony that prayer works. And not all prayer works that way. I've had a lot of different experiences. Some answers come quick, some answers come slow. And some, might not come until heaven, but I do know that they do come. There's this quote I wanted to read that I saw the other day. Really great. Okay. It says, additionally, President Henry B. Eyring confirmed such ideas in an April 2008 General Conference session. He prophesied of several significant events in our future, one of those being the increasing return of wayward children as a reward for parents' unrelenting efforts. He indicated that if we never give up, neither will God give up. And in many cases, where our children seem unresponsive to us, God will call back our children through those who are called to serve in the church. And I want to say church or addiction professionals or, spiritual mentors. I mean, that's anybody that God has called to call back his children. And I feel that is so true. And to me, that's kind of goes along with kind of the boundaries. Because as my dad was able and my parents were able to step aside, it allowed the room for Heavenly Father to do what he does best. And that's to save his children. And he put certain people in my path that I was willing to listen to and that had the message that I needed. I never would have received that any other way. So, my recovery has been really great. It's been hard at times. It's been really great at times. My 2 and 3-year-old children now are 13 and just turned 15. And they're starting to go through their own trials. Probably one of the most consistent prayers that I've prayed for the last 10 years has been to be able to be present with my children and to let go of the guilt that I have felt pretty much most of this time to some extent. And for my children to be happy. They really struggled, especially my son. My son really, really, really struggled. He's 15. And I would pray and I would pray and I'd pray and I put him in therapy and I did all these different things. And this last summer, he was telling me he wanted to move in with his dad because we're divorced. And, in my mind, that wasn't the best solution. I didn't think he should go to his dad. And I had fought that. He had been bringing it up for a couple of years at that point. And I fought it and I fought it and I fought it. And finally this summer, I got this, revelation that just was, you've done what you can do. It's time to step aside now. I've got this. So that's what I did. And I let him go and I let him go to his dad's. And I was so scared that he wouldn't want to come over anymore, wouldn't want to visit. But I had to do that. And luckily he came around and he did visit. And, the year prior, he was going into high school and I had told him, I really want you to go to seminary. I don't remember if I said you have to, or you encouraged him. I don't remember exactly what I said, but that was an important thing. I had let him not go to church for a couple years up until that point because he was so opposed to anything to do with me, really. He was really angry. And he decided to go to seminary at the beginning of this year. And he went to this new high school and he joined this mountain biking team and he continued to come around. And now he calls me to tell me about the things he's learning in seminary and how cool God is and how God loves him and how he has important things to share with his class that God told him he needed to share. And how cool is that? And my dad, today he's remarried. He's working on some new things now and working in his recovery. And he's got a lot going on with him. And he has more, I think, joy and peace in his life than he has had in years and years and years. My mom, she's struggled on and off, but overall, because of my recovery, I was able to help her go to treatment because she had addictions. They say this is a family disease, but I also want to say it's a blessing, a family blessing. When one person gets sober and gets into recovery, everyone is blessed because of it. I'm really grateful to be here tonight. I definitely have, a testimony of this program, of the Lord. I know that the 12-step program works. If we work, it works for everybody and it works for everything. I got sober and I realized, oh my gosh, I have a ton of problems. Drugs and alcohol were the solution to my problem. The problem was how I think. So now I get to apply the steps to the way I think and the way I feel and my relationships. And what a beautiful thing that is. I know nothing is too hard that the Lord can't fix or heal or save. The Lord is always there, waiting and willing and wanting to rescue each and one of us. And yeah, there is hope for sure. If there is hope for someone like me, broken and desperate and alone, there's hope for somebody like you. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Wow, Lindsay, thank you so much. And one thing I love about your recovery is a lot of it is very spiritual. And what we hear a lot is the shame. We were taught as family members that shame is the core center of addiction. And I love that you started talking about all the shame and you didn't think that you could even, reach out to your earthly father or your God in heaven, and addiction is very much about self-hate, self-hatred. And a lot of times our loved ones they don't feel like they could actually get sober, like Russ mentioned and you mentioned. And so as we started setting boundaries, I love that you talked about boundaries. Boy, we have to do that with a lot of love, a lot of love, and a lot of encouragement. But as you start feeling the pain, right, it kind of helps you to start recognizing that you need that help. So thank you so much. And really appreciate your strength spiritually. You know, the founders of AA talked about, like I said, that the foundation is spiritual, and we encourage everyone to find that connection, whatever that looks like for you. So thanks so much, Lindsay.
That was great, Lindsay. Thank you so much. And those of you who want to watch a gripping video about Lindsay's story, you can Google
YouTube.
12 steps to change. Okay, 12 steps to change. And there is a video on every single one of the 12 steps. Her story is step 11, and it will make you cry. It's an incredible story.
It gives a lot of hope.
And so that is real. And you know, in recovery, miracles happen, and you've just heard a couple of them. Here's another miracle. Again, thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Here's another miracle. Lane Porter. A couple days ago, he and I were at Chili's and we're having lunch. And you guys, I felt like I was among one of the noble and great ones. He's an incredible individual. He is a clinical mental health counselor. He works at the ranch. He is a recovering addict of many years. He's been a therapist for over 14 years. But he's had to pay a heavy price. Many times, as I talk with parents, they're worried about their son or their daughter going to jail. I like what was just mentioned by Lindsay. Jail is not bad, it's good. In fact, Lane, he went to the pen for 18 months. And he's going to talk maybe and touch on that a little bit. But from those dark days behind bars, he learned much. And, you know, our sons had struggles and went to jail a number of times. But there's great things that come from that type of thing. But I want to turn some time over to Lane, talk about hope with parents and spouses. He will answer a few questions that have come in already. And so let's turn some time over to Lane. Thanks, Lane.
Thank you, Lane.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry about that. Well, thank you, Rick and Christy. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you to speak a little bit about hope. Specifically, I've been asked to speak about hope for the family and hope for the spouse. And as we've been sitting here and I've been listening, I also was listening for inspiration, because I don't tend to plan these things. I want to see kind of what comes up, what questions are asked, what the messages of the other speakers are, and kind of let those things guide me. And I feel profoundly moved to not sway from the topic. In fact, probably to talk maybe more about the topic than I was going to before, but maybe not in the way that I thought I was, in maybe a less pretty way. And to some extent, that's the reality of hope and mental illness. As my biography iterates, and as Rick has shared, I do see the disease of addiction being a family issue. I believe that it's almost impossible for somebody to get ill whom we love about, whom we care about, and for us to not experience our own illness along with them. Any parent who has sat up nights worried about their child, any child, as Erica Erica is a child of an addict, and has asked a question that I'm going to respond to, and has a parent who has disappeared and doesn't respond to outreach from their children. Any spouse who has sat with her children, trying to explain where daddy is, understands the illness that I'm speaking of. This is an intergenerational illness. This is a transrelational illness. This crosses to our spouses. It gets passed down to our children. It infects our parents. And oftentimes, as another person asked about, I don't have his name in front of me, but it is passed on from generation to generation. And so we've got this cyclical illness, this infectious illness that, of course, affects the addict and harms them, but two, gets passed to their children and rots, the core of their relationships and their connections, and robs us of that kind of peace of family. I apologize, I have a puppy, and the family left me in peace, but I've got the puppy and he's barking, so bear with me on that. At any rate, so as I'm tasked with providing hope to that, I have to triage, and if you've spoken with me as a family member, you've probably, and you've had a family member who's particularly resistant to treatment, you've probably heard me talk of this. I have to address the most present patient. And very frequently that isn't the addict. Very frequently for me, in my role as an admissions person, dealing with spouses, talking to mom and dad, the patient that presents to me is mom and dad. The patient that presents to me is the children. The patient that presents to me is the spouse. And so as I provide hope to you, the part that isn't going to be a bright is it's not going to be a miraculous equation for all the things you need to say and do to get your family member into treatment. That equation does not necessarily exist. There are all the things that you can do that are right. And there is getting yourself healthy. And then what we are left with is hope and faith. Now, that does not always mean that we will get what we hope for. Sometimes, as Lindsay said, the growth for the addict will be in the next life. Sometimes the blessings will come through perseverance, through the hardship. If an ill family can see their ill addict and they can set boundaries, they can let them sit in jail, they can reconnect with one another, they can hold each other up and build each other through the illness, they will be lifted out of the toxicity. They will experience the miracle of recovery. And then what happens to the addict? That's their business. That will be what it is. Their recovery, their time will come, and it may be in this world and it may be in another world. So our job is to do the next right thing and understand that the course of others isn't given to us. Agency is universal. And our attempts to control or, obviously we want to do our share of persuading. We want to do our share of boundary setting. We want to do our share of communication. We want to be there to reach out. Certainly, if the addict wants to head upwards, we want to be there to help them head upwards. But sometimes those things aren't available to us. Sometimes what we are doing is codependent or enabling. Sometimes what we're doing is keeping us ill. And in those times, we have to understand that sometimes, like Lindsay said, the right thing to do is to step away. Sometimes the right thing to do is to let them stay in jail. And sometimes hope can be a hope for oneself that despite what I am going through, I can get healthy. Despite what my son is going through, I can get healthy. Despite what my loving spouse is going through, I can get healthy. And then we can take steps. We can come to family groups. We can go to an individual therapist. We can talk to our clergy, and we can find ways to get healthy because of our addict, in spite of our addict, or alongside our addict. Which of those paths it's going to be isn't necessarily up to us, though. The only path that we have full control over, and I'll say full in quotation marks, is our own. So I want to attend just kind of to some questions kind of along those lines. Erica, and I'm not even going to try your last name. Erica asks, for someone dealing with a parent with addiction and the parent won't speak to any of the kids, how do you handle this? Speak to one another, love one another, carry each other through this path. Do not enable your father or mother. I'm not sure which it is, but don't enable them. Don't fret. if they are not reachable because they're making themselves not reachable, then you take care of you. It is not your job to hunt them down. It is not your job to beg and persuade them. It is your job to keep yourself healthy and to love them and let them know that you're always here. And then, if necessary, back away and allow them to be ill. And that's not a spectacular answer. None of these answers are going to be spectacular answers because we hope that there's a magic equation. Sometimes there just isn't. What I will say along those lines, all joy, all real meaningful joy is born out of adversity. It is through persevering through these hardships, through this pain, that we get to experience what joy and meaning and purpose in life really is. When you can go through something hard, like a father who won't talk to you, and you can come throughout the other side loving him, forgiving him, and being at peace and having a better relationship with your brothers and sisters, you have broken that intergenerational cycle. And the other fellow, sorry, I am not good at my mouse. The other fellow, Bill, no, not Bill. Joe, sorry, the other gal, Joe, asked about the how big the impact is of alcoholism on subsequent generations. It's profound. If your dad's an addict, you've most likely got the gene. Our job here and our job in this, amongst the 80 of us, is to break that cycle. The genetics are already working against us. And then we're going to have all sorts of perpetuating risk factors that come along with addiction, like poor communication, enmeshment, control issues that are all likely to exacerbate the issue and make the issue more likely to occur. So our job is to get ourselves healthy and to break those cycles. If you are the parent and you're in recovery, educate your children. Don't hide it. Don't hide that, your disease and your illness and pretend it doesn't happen and you're an adult who doesn't make mistakes. Teach your children about that. Educate them. Teach them about the risks and encourage them to learn about it themselves so that we can break that intergenerational issue. And then somebody asked, how do you know when it's time to walk away? Boy, there isn't a good equation for that. Somebody else might be able to attend to that better. But if you are finding yourself getting sick because of the illness of someone else, it's certainly time to start setting boundaries. If if that sickness is beginning to impact your other relationships, your own wellness, your own performance in your job, in roles that are important to you, your role as a mother, your role as a father, your role as a husband or wife, your role as an employee, your role as a member of organizations, if any of those roles are suffering because of this other person, it's time to start stepping away. I don't know how far that is, but certainly it's time to start stepping away. When we think of doing our best as the loved one of an addict, remember that doing your best is about limits. When you're doing your best, you're doing your best in everything that you do, which usually means not your most, but limits. I can only give so much to my work because my role as a father is important. I can only give so much to my wife because my role as an employee is important. I can only give so much to my recreation because my role as a member of my church is important. Most of the time, doing our best is about limits. And so it is about walking away from things. And if one of those things is compulsive and ill and toxic, that's a good thing to set boundaries with and to step away from. I'm reading through some questions. I'm going to let Christy and Rick jump in while I read some of these questions.
That's great. It's interesting what you said just a second ago. You said, as a parent, if you've struggled in the past with addiction, don't hide it. I thought that was interesting. Don't hide it, but you said share your weakness and be open with your kids. I mean, there's two components. There's the genetic component and the environmental component. Many people can drink and never have, because they don't have the genetic component to fall into that addiction. Others can take one drink or two or three, and now they're in trouble. So we need to educate our kids, particularly if it's in our line. And 1 in 7 people struggle with some form of addiction. So we'll come back with more questions, but that was awesome. That was really awesome. Thank you so much, Lane. Very educational. Our last speaker, you'll note that the last 3 speakers have been recovering addicts, including Lane. Our next and last speaker is going to speak on hope for family members, Deanna Palma. She has been working her recovery for years. She sponsors several in recovery. She has supported originally her loved one in addiction. And, we learned that the best thing we can do if we have a loved one in addiction is to work our own recovery. Here's a prime example of what working your recovery can do in providing peace and hope. She just retired recently from the U of U Clinical Research Center up the U. She is a registered nurse and is an incredible woman. She walks the path of recovery. And we'll turn some time now over to Deanna. Deanna, thank you so much for joining us and talking about hope for family members.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. My name is Deanna, and I'm so honored to walk our hearts together for a few minutes and talk about hope for the family member from a family member perspective. I love the acronym for HOPE, hearing other people's experience. And, I'm one in recovery. I really love the acronyms and the slogans, kind of like what I would refer to as recovery in my pocket. But I'm just disclosing straight out that anything I share tonight, any acronyms, anything I share with you, I've heard it from somebody else probably, or from the great recovery literature that we have. And, but ultimately, all credit for everything goes to God. We need to give credit where credit is due. And I believe that the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are inspired of God and provide a spiritual solution for, for our family disease. I love to talk about hope with families that are still out there suffering from the family disease of alcoholism. So an important little side jaunt. We can substitute the word alcoholism with addiction, affliction, people, places, things, and situations. And I used to think, well, yeah, it's like the magic pill to cure all. But the family disease of alcoholism often impacts every family member in distinct ways. For me, it comes down to using or doing anything that we need to do to anesthetize our feelings. And, life is going to life all over me. And so our recovery as family members requires us to fail to heal. And at first glance, some of those of you that are probably here with us for the first time tonight might think the term family disease might sound extreme or a little bit of offensive almost, because it's them, it's not us. What are you talking about? But until we look at our families, considering all the flavors of this disease, particularly the more socially acceptable or palatable addictions, things such as workaholism, sports addictions, gaming addictions, exercise bulimia, perfectionism, compulsive overeating. And by the way, my name is Deanna, and I'm a compulsive overeater. And I'll just take a short little side jaunt here and tell you that when we go back to face-to-face meetings at the ranch, you can thank me for the sturdy chairs in the family meeting room, because I broke one of those chairs when I was my 80-pound heavier self. And this is me being vulnerable, proving that family members can also hit rock bottom, or in my case, I broke my chair and my bottom hit the rock. So you can just kind of switch those around a little bit. So as family members, the part of the disease that we usually have in common with our loved ones is codependency, which is a disease of behaviors. And I recall asking a friend, a long timer in AA, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Does the codependency or the addiction come first? And he said, it is always the addiction. And some of the symptoms of codependency are: we say yes when we mean no. We do for them what they can do for themselves. We allow ourselves to be doormats, and then we resent you for it. We come from diverse backgrounds and circumstances, but we all have the same problem. We're powerless over this family disease of alcoholism, and it makes our lives unmanageable. It owns too much real estate in our heads. And so, by the way, my name is Deanna, and I'm a recovering codependent, okay? So though we officially started our recovery journey, my husband and I, 6 years ago, to support a loved one in recovery, you can see that alcoholism is a family disease that impacts every family member in distinct ways. And there's usually a heavy generational component, has already been discussed tonight. And I am the spouse of an adult child of an alcoholic, whose father, grandfather, and great-grandfather was an alcoholic, and all their wives were codependents. But I need to tell you that my mother-in-law, my suegra, she was one of the most loving and powerful female influences in my life. And her life was a flaming torch for her family in such a dark abyss. So I have found that out of that dark space, which many of you are sitting in tonight, comes the greatest hope, and honoring what God has given me and my family by surrendering it all to Him. If I'm doing fine, if everything's going good, it pushes me into my ego, and the acronym for ego, easing or edging God out. I'm fine. I don't need you. But these kind of things that we have in our life, it has us all turning to our higher power and really needing Him. And the grace of God helps me every day via working the 12 steps, and it strengthens me to do good things in ways that I could never do for myself. And God promises that if we're humble and honest, and there's a reason that step one is honesty, that His grace will help us overcome all our personal weaknesses, as we've heard so beautifully shared with us tonight. So my experience is that there is hope, and that there is recovery, and it is equally transformative for the family member. I want to stress that. And I'd just like to pause and extend a really warm welcome to our newcomers. And I'd like to say to you, welcome home. You're the most important people at this meeting tonight. So you don't need to do this alone anymore. So please don't stop coming before the miracle happens. As family members, we learn of the 3 C's. I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control it. But my favorite is the 4th C. And that's that I can look at my contribution, and I loved hearing that, because that's something I can do. I can look at my contribution, even if I don't think I have one right now. I'm willing. I can look at my contribution and the way that I respond to life lifing all over me, right? So a few personal reflections and practical tools that I can share on hope. As family members, we always make it clear that we're not therapists and we can't tell you what to do, but we can share our own experience, strength, and hope. And recovery, as recovering family members, our job is to take what we want. And, you know, the slogan is leave the rest, but I like to say save the rest. Because something that might not agree with me right now might down the road. You know, that's happened to me many times in my recovery. This evening, it's been such an honor to share this platform with all these esteemed recovery professionals that are therapists. And they can share the latest evidence-based practices and models with us, and they can tell us some things to do. But as family members in recovery, we stick to cleaning our own side of the street and sharing our own experience, strength, and hope. By the way, I got to tell you, just because I can't tell you what to do, it doesn't mean I don't want to tell you what to do. And as a matter of fact, I'm really good at telling people what to do. I earned a good income identifying and troubleshooting the big stickies. That isn't a character asset I really like about myself. But when I let this asset run amok, and I let it get out of boundary, my family's members are not terribly impressed. And in fact, I can blow up the relationships that mean the most to me. And I've learned that this is a fairly common defect of family members with addicted loved ones. We don't, you know, it makes sense. We don't like what we're going to feel if our loved ones does X, Y, or Z. So we try to get out in front of that and prevent every eventuality. But what if that eventuality is what God needs and has designed for them to help them in their recovery? So here's a practical Al-Anon tool I want to share with you that may prove helpful for my fellow controlitarians. Okay, so right here tonight, I have a hula hoop, and people that have been in meeting with me, they've heard me talk about this, okay? And I'm wearing this hula hoop as a visual reminder of what is mine and what is yours, okay? And I love to think of the Serenity Prayer when I put on my hula hoop. So God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That is everything, all the people, places, things, situations, and all that junk hanging around out there outside my hula hoop. The courage to change the things I can, which is everything inside this hula hoop. And as a matter of fact, this hula hoop is probably a little bit too large for this codependent person. And the wisdom to know the difference. But, you know, you guys, this is the good news. This doesn't have to be perfect. It's a process, you know, and we're going to do it imperfectly, one day at a time, but we're going to do it together. So in my first meeting, my last meeting that I attended, and every meeting in between, there's one consistent message that I've heard, and that's that the best way that I can help my loved one is by working my own recovery. And that means analyzing and utilizing the 12 steps that teach us the how-tos. And it makes sense that we're going to work the same steps as our loved ones because we've learned all night that this is a family disease, right? So it makes sense. We're going to learn how to give up. We're going to learn how to clean up. We're going to learn how to make up, and we're going to learn how to keep up. And the meetings are where we really learn to take this deep dive into the steps, and where we meet other recovery family members that speak our language and they understand the way our brain is wired. You know, for our loved ones, they say it is allergy of the body and obsession of the mind. For us, we can so relate to that obsession of the mind. It's where we learn how to wash, rinse, and repeat because we just can't stay clean on yesterday's shower. So meetings are also where we can find a sponsor and friends in recovery. I like to call these friends my spiritual board of directors. Some people call it their God squad. But a sponsor is someone who has something we want, and who's just a little farther along the road of recovery. They're essentially a step guide. And they pay loving witness to our transformation and help point out our blind spots. Remember, we want to remember that insanity, step 2 is come to believe that a power greater than us can return us to sanity. Well, to help me understand sanity, I need to understand insanity. And that's to keep doing what I've always done and expect different results. So if I'm always trying to fix this on my own, I might want to consider getting a sponsor or somebody to help me walk through the steps. The big book tells us that the best way we can ensure immunity to alcoholism. Alcoholics help alcoholics, codependents help codependents. That's the way we do it. That's step 12. This is an 11-step program. It's a 12-step program. So just what I want to share about that is, you know, the goal for us as recovering family members is the same as it is for our loved ones. It's to have a spiritual awakening and to live in steps 10, 11, and 12. And the way we get there is by working our steps. So I want to take just a minute and pause and say what an honor it is to sponsor these beautiful, courageous women. And I'm telling you, the family members, the women that I work with, they are dynamic, they are courageous, and they are serious about their recovery. And I'm so grateful to them for letting me walk in that sacred space with them, because that's what it is. And I'm telling you, just the last couple of weeks, as I've met with some of them and heard the just beautiful transformations that are taking place, not only in their lives, but with their families. And they're not always the happiest of circumstances, but I'll tell you, a recovering family member, that's the best thing that can be done to help our family member. And the most incredible part about it is to see how when we let go, it leaves that space for God to work, you know. I'd like to end by saying that I'd be happy to discuss with any family members how to find a sponsor. And you can also ask that question in any of your meetings. You can ask it of the facilitators. I'm going to share with you that when we started recovery, we were told that this time is a gift. And, you know, I'm going to tell you, my husband and I, we both had big jobs. My husband was in a heavy duty ecclesiastical responsibility in our faith base. And, but we took that to heart, and we really simplified our lives, and we really drilled in on it, and we've never looked back, and we've never regretted it. There is a recovery friend of mine that says that God is always launching search and rescue missions for his children. This has certainly been the case for us, and perhaps today you've just been found. So remember that our worst day in recovery is always better than our best day in our disease. And may each of you and your families be blessed with love, light, and hope on your journey. And a reminder just to fasten your seatbelts, okay? And with that, I'll pass.
Wow, Deanna, thank you so much. I think we need to write all that down and have this little mini book. Those of you who have been in our family education classes, when Deanna's in a meeting, the meeting is always so much deeper and richer. And we thank you. And one thing that Rick and I love so much is we see your faces when you come into these meetings, these rooms for the first time. We see the pain, we see the just the fear. And I remember when Deanna and her sweet husband Will came the first time. I remember you know, that, and then for me to see her, well, it's been like 6 years now later, and just to see the powerful woman that she is, and just how many women she's helping. I'm so grateful. But that's an example of what recovery does. Like as we absorb these principles, we find peace, and then we're like, it's a miracle, and we can't help ourselves but to share that. And Deanna, you shared so beautifully. I really want that all written down. I want a copy of that. and when she said the chicken and egg thing, you said addiction, but you meant codependency. I know you did. But that's the thing is, right, is that codependency, you guys, that is like in a family with addiction, we were always taught the codependency is the hardest to cure. So you've heard tonight about boundaries, detachment, the disease aspect, all of this stuff. We talk about this in our classes. So please join us. We have the most beautiful workbook. But go ahead.
You know, you guys, you don't, many of you know Deanna like we do. When she first came to the classes, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of hurt, anger. There was resentments, trying to control. What I've seen with the Deanna is she leaned into her recovery. Recovery for us as family members is not recovery from drugs or alcohol, but recovery from the emotional drama, the shrapnel, the issues that we deal with. It's recovery from codependency. And codependency is this: if my loved one in addiction is doing good, I'm doing good. If they're not doing good, I'm not doing good. See, that's codependency. Recovery, and you can sense this in Deanna. Recovery is this: if my loved one is doing good, I'm doing good. But if my loved one is not doing good, I'm still doing good. See, that's the peace that we want.
The peace in the middle of the chaos.
Yes.
That's what we need. Thanks, you guys. Let's go ahead and move into our Q&A. We're going to bring up all of our presenters now. Let me grab that. Honey.
I've got it.
Oh, okay.
So you guys are really looking forward to going through a few questions. The first one, this is for you, Russ, if you could unmute. And it's this: what do you think is the number one or number two thing that have helped you stay sober?
Yeah, when I read that in the message board, I've been pondering that a little bit. One or two things that have been the most crucial, the most pivotal. Number one was the connection, the group, a support system. I'd say that's number one. Through that, this is just my experience. I'd love to actually hear from anybody else on this one too, but my experience through that group support, that's how I found my connection with God. It was through that. So it went like from here to my fellow man up. That's how it started for me at the beginning. So that support system was number one. It seems to be a bit of a theme tonight. Sponsorship in the 12-step program was huge. If I was a woman, I would have Deanna be my sponsor. I'd ask her right now, because it's a sponsor, someone that has something that you want, but they also want what they have too. They're content with their lives. They have a peace, like you mentioned, Christy. So I'd say sponsorship and a group connection.
Great answer.
Sure. Maybe Lindsay, you can answer that question as well. Do you need me to repeat that?
Yeah.
What do you think is the number one or number two thing that has helped you stay sober? Lindsay, your thoughts?
For sure, agree with Russ with just the community and the fellowship as one of them. At the ranch, I was part of the women's program, and we had, so the men, they have the band of brothers, and we had the band of sober sisters. And even outside of that, we still meet together. So that program isn't there anymore, but we still meet regularly on our own, and do things regularly together because we need each other. I heard one time, I can't get sober, but we can get sober together. And that's for sure been my experience. I've relied on my sisters in particular in recovery more times than I can count. They've saved my life and influenced my life in different ways. There's so many things, but I would say that, and for me, prayer, probably prayer and fellowship, if I had to pick two. Prayer has been huge. And by prayer, I mean meditating, praying in the car, praying on your knees, listening to inspirational music so we can feel the Spirit talk back to us. Just prayer and being connected to God.
I love that. Wow, thanks, Lindsay. I love that.
Well said. Well said. So, Lane, let's talk a little bit about boundaries, enabling. A lot of times as family members, before we get into recovery and we're struggling with an addict, we don't even know what enabling is, and we don't even know that we are enabling. So first off, enabling, what's the difference between that and helping your addict? Because we want to help our addict, don't we? But enabling is not good. In fact, there's two things that make addiction worse. Number one is using, but number two is enabling. So here's the definition that helped us. Enabling is doing something for your addict that they can and should do for themselves. Helping your addict is doing something that they can't do for themselves. Okay, so again, enabling is doing something they can and should do for themselves. Well, you kind of mesh that with this idea called boundaries. You know, what are boundaries? And Lane, the question is this: what is the best way to create boundaries with a recovering spouse addict? Can you maybe put some meat on the bones on that? Maybe mesh that a little bit if it's appropriate with enabling?
Sure. So I like that definition of enabling. I like to expand that a little bit because it anytime you are, I kind of think of it in this way. If you are helping somebody in any way or making it any easier in any way for an ill person to remain ill, or to continue to be ill, you're enabling that illness. You're
Like
helping
preventing
it. You're
consequences.
helping it along. Yep. So any help that, and the truth is, for all of you, this is a fuzzy line. There is not a clear black and white between helping and enabling, because they look very similar. And there will be some places where they're going to do a little bit of this. They're going to cross over a little bit. And that's okay. Like, I mean, if you're a parent, you know, you're going to do some helping that's probably a little bit enabling. But if it's with the hope that it's going to help them move up, then you know, that's yours to pick. You know, I'm certainly not going to sit here and tell you that, you know, you shouldn't do that because it's a little enabling. If it has the hope of helping, go for it. In terms of boundaries, especially for a spouse, remember, folks, there are thinking words and there are fighting words. Thinking words tell a person who you are, what you stand for, what you feel, and what you're going to do. Fighting words tell a person what they're going to do. And if you're like me and Deanna, and you're a controller, you tell me what I'm going to do. And it doesn't matter if I was going to do that anyway, I'm going to push back, you know? And so we don't want to set boundaries that tell people what they're going to do. We set boundaries using facts, feelings, and fair requests. Facts: you did this thing that I disagree with or that hurt me. Feelings: I feel hurt when people do that thing. Fair requests: you know, if you're going to do that, you know, whatever, you know, please try and decrease that. That's facts, feelings, fair requests. But your boundary tells them what you're going to do if that continues. If you're going to keep doing that, I'm not going to be around you. So when we set boundaries with folks, it says, you know, as a parent or a spouse, hey, this is a sober house, and people that live in this house don't use substances. If you're going to be using substances, you're not going to be here. Also, I don't like to be around, I don't like to be around people who are intoxicated or using. If you're going to be intoxicated or using, you can't be around me. That's an example of a boundary. It tells them what I'm going to do. I'm going to be free from you. If you're going to behave disrespectfully, I'm going to disengage from this conversation. It's just letting them know what you're going to do. So a boundary is always enforceable, because it isn't trying to control what someone else does. It's just very clearly letting them know what you're going to do if whatever it is they're doing continues.
That's right.
Well said. You know, on that same line, Elaine, the question, and we've partly answered it, but it says another question. It says, how do we know if we are enabling or being codependent?
Yep. And like I think I said it, and you know, I thought Deanna's thing about enabling codependency was spot on. But if you're doing something, again, if you're doing something that is making it easier, so if you've got a family member who doesn't want treatment, but they can stay at your house and they're in your basement and they're probably using down there, you're not sure, you told them not to, but you know, but it smells funny and you found a bottle last week, you are enabling. You're, you know, they say, you know, the unloved addict dies, the loved addict dies in his parents' basement. And unfortunately phrase is so common that it's become cliche almost in our industry, because in the name of love, we give them a place to use, we give them some money, we drive them places, we feed them so that they can die in comfort. Instead of saying, I love you too much to help you kill yourself, and so you won't be allowed to be at our house doing this. We love you too much. Good luck to you. Here's here's the address for the homeless shelter, and we love you so much, and we hope that when you're ready for help that you call us, because we're there for you, but we're not going to help anymore with the path that you're currently on. So if you think, if anything you're doing, you have to justify, explain, rationalize, excuse in your head, that's a red flag, because we never have to explain and justify healthy behavior. So if you're rationalizing and explaining it in your head, it's probably a red flag. And two, if it's helping them stay sick or making it any easier for them to continue going downhill, it's enabling.
Hey, and I'd like to share something too. We actually have 3 categories for codependency. And I kind of feel like we're coming at you guys tonight with the big old fire hose. And I just want you to know that it's okay, because these 12 steps are cyclical. We keep going through this information when you come to the classes. It won't take long for you to pick up on this information. But with codependency, there's 3 categories that we kind of lump all of the behaviors in. One is the rescuing behaviors, which includes enabling. So that is part of codependency. The second one is persecuting behaviors, where we're maybe shaming or we've got some anger going on, all of that. And the third category is suffering behaviors, which I actually was stuck in that for years, even when I was in recovery, and I didn't recognize how my suffering behaviors were kind of contributing to the dysfunction in my home. So I love these questions. These are awesome.
Yeah,
I think we're ready to maybe go to the next one.
I'm going to pose this to you, Deanna. We have a lot of family members, I'm sure. We probably have well over 100 people that are listening right now with us, and many of them are hurting because they just don't have peace. They try to go to bed at night and they're worried. At 3 o'clock in the morning, their heart is pounding because they are homobilizing, or they have fear, or they have these resentments, or they're feeling they're taken advantage of because they were lied to, and there's just no peace. And their spouse is thinking it should be handled this way, and they just know it should be handled this way. And boy, that's
where we were. Enabler, the tough love person.
And it just tears at ones. And so what's interesting with you, Deanna, is that, we want our addicts to get into treatment and to stay sober. That was not the case with you. It wasn't the deal where your loved one got into treatment and then everything's fine and their sobriety continued. There was struggles, many struggles. And what I see in you, though, and I think everybody sees, is that peace. And how did you find peace? This is the question. How did you find peace about your loved one's addiction when there were still struggles and of course you couldn't control it? How did you find that peace?
Thanks for that question. That's a great question. It's kind of back to the same thing. I would really encourage family members to just go to Al-Anon and start working your own recovery. I saw a question where somebody asked, how do you know when it's time to walk away? And as family members, we're kind of encouraged to give it a minute and work on ourselves. We've just received some beautiful information on thinking words, for an example. How about, instead of just saying I'm done, how about practicing some of those things and seeing if they work, and working on ourselves? And for me, it was just focusing on myself. And I'll be a little bit vulnerable here and tell you, I knew that our loved ones needed to make amends, and so when I first came into recovery, I'm like, I can't wait until my loved one makes amends to me, but my higher power told me, Deanna, how about if you make your own amends first? And every time I thought my loved one should go to a meeting, I go to a meeting. If I think my loved one needs to get a sponsor, I got a sponsor, and just focused on that. And it takes up all that space. It kind of slows down that worrying in the head. And the thing I love about Al-Anon and the Al-Anon literature, it's so rich. And also the manual we use at the ranch, Healing Through Christ, it's really, there's really just some good practical tools that we can use, you know, to slow down that obsession of our mind. And so, you know, my heart really goes out to those that are deciding, you know, for an example, if they should leave their spouse or, you know, whatever like that. But again, I would just, you know, encourage, what's worked for me is to just kind of give it a minute and really dig in deep, take a deeper dive into my own recovery and to reach out to people. You know, if I'm a mom that has a loved one in recovery, I'm going to get a list of other moms that I can call up and say, hey, how did you navigate this? You know, if I'm a spouse, I'm going to get a list of spouses, you know, and I'm going to get a sponsor that can kind of walk me through and that I can call up and say, hey, can you point out my blind spots here?
I love that. I
Oh,
love
I
that.
hope, does that help?
Yeah.
A little, Rick? Is-
And I'm really glad you brought up our manual. Like, we have found the best on the internet, the most incredible workbook that we use. We work the same 12 steps that our loving addicts work when they're in recovery, and it's called Healing Through Christ, and you get that at healingthroughchrist.org. And man, if you guys can get that and start reading that today, the very first thing they do in the appendix is teach us that addiction's a disease. And in 2011, there was a 4-year study with 80 experts that the American Society of Addiction Medicine did. And they were the ones that came to pronounce that addiction is a chronic brain disease and not just maladaptive behaviors. It is a disease. So their question that I just want to share to kind of sum this up before we go on, when it says, how do we know if we are enabling or being codependent? If we are not feeling peace, then we are probably working on someone else's side of the street. And as long as and what's so beautiful about recovery is we learn that we have the power to work on ourselves. We start to feel peace. We start to feel self-love. I forgot to say when I said earlier that addiction's self-hatred, but the 12 steps of recovery move us towards self-love. And as you start to have these tools of these 12 steps, you'll have peace in your life, and you will naturally start to form your limits and boundaries with a lot of love. It's not anything that we do in a harmful way. It's a lot of love, and we're in charge of that. Like, a boundary is what I need to feel safe. And if somebody else crosses that boundary, it's what am I going to do? I'm not depending on them. It's what am I going to do? And it's super empowering. And you start little, and they're not going to like it so much at first, whoever you're dealing with. But slowly it's the most loving thing we can do for relationships. And really, recovery is about relationships. It's about meaningful human connection. So let's move on to the next.
You know,
question.
I hope that everyone just really heard what she said. You know, one of the hardest things I had, and that remember we had, is in the middle of addiction with our boys. It's really easy to enable so that you're trying to protect them. It's really easy not to have boundaries because you don't want to go there, because what could happen to them? What recovery did for us, like you just said, is it provided peace. But I saw in you, it provided a depth. Your roots of strength went deep, that when you need to stop enabling and have boundaries, you did. And that caused,
it feels good.
It caused consequences, which consequences cause pain. And that's when recovery happens. So there's some of you that are maybe thinking, I just don't know if I can be tough. I'm charitable, and I want to validate that. But recovery will help you gain depth. I remember coming home one time and looking at her, and she's in the corner in the fetal position, emotionally bankrupt. The biggest miracle in our whole family was her working through this.
Okay.
And being strong. So thanks, it was awesome. Okay, next question to Lindsay. So Lindsay, when you said you were going to paint a picture, you did. And it was really tough for me to think back when you're in the middle of your addiction, you don't have your kids. The shame on a scale to 1 to 10 must have been a 20. The shame is a core center that was driving addiction. Can I ask you two questions? One, can you explain to our audience, our family members, what you were feeling at that time when you didn't have your kids? There's others that are, you know, their dads aren't providing like maybe they should have, or the husband's not providing like they should have. There's some wives that maybe, you know, same situation. Number one, what were you feeling at that time so people can see and sense that? But the bigger question, number two, how did you find the courage to take a breath and say, I have got to get out of this? And how did that begin? How did that begin?
Those are great questions.
Sorry, I gotta take a picture.
As far as how I felt during that time, so there's kind of two instances, and they both go hand in hand in the same feelings. But I had a relapse after about 2 years sober, and so I'm just going to speak on that one. But it's the same. And I was in the middle of the substance abuse counseling program. I had kind of just gotten my kids back recently. Like in that last year, I was working at a treatment center. I was just, you know, going to church and doing these things. And I had this relapse, and it just about killed me emotionally. I remember when I was getting the drugs and getting ready to use that night. And I remember just this tangible like spirit walking out of the house. And I remember left feeling so alone. I don't think I've ever felt so alone in my life. So scared, so full of shame, so much guilt, so much self-hatred, just everything you can imagine. And luckily I ended up having kind of a domino effect with some things to get me back into treatment rather quickly. And it's because I had surrounded myself with a support group around me. And so it was like one call here, one call there, one call there, and I was in treatment. And I remember that first night in treatment, and I was on the bathroom floor in a fetal position, like Rick was talking about, Christy, crying and crying, crying with the bathroom door shut, not wanting to leave, and praying just for it to be over. And, you know, it to be over, I don't even know really what I wanted it to be over. I just didn't want to feel that pain anymore. And, you know, especially after a relapse, it's like you learn these things, a lot of things, and your life changes. And, you know, and the truth is a lot of people do have a relapse at some point. Not everyone has to. It doesn't have to be part of your story, but a lot of people do. And for me, it was part of my story. And so there was a lot of guilt with that. It was like, how could I do this? How could I do this again? Just beating myself up, you know, leaving my kids again to go to treatment. And I just, there's nothing worse. I don't think there's anything worse than probably that night. But I am grateful for that night because I remember it well, and it definitely has helped keep me focused on the path of recovery. And as far as what's helped me make the choice to do something different, I don't remember exactly how you worded it, Rick, but
what was finally the thing that made you change?
Yeah. You know, so I hear a lot, and I think there's conflicting things. I hear a lot of different things by professionals, even as far as people getting into treatment. Well, you have to be willing, you have to want it. You have to want it 50%, 51%, 100%. You hear so many things. And for me, my experience was I didn't really want it. I did not want to get sober. I mean, I was really fighting it, honestly. I went to jail, and like a prior jail experience that I talked about. I didn't want to leave my boyfriend at the time. I mean, I had a whole mess of things. I was scared. I mean, obviously there was a part of me that wanted it desperately. And that was my spirit that was like crying out, enough is enough. Because without that, I wouldn't have gone. But logically in my head, I mean, everything was telling me not to go. I had 100 reasons not to go. But I ended up there. I ended up in treatment. For me, it's why you stay. That's when the magic happens, and that's when the miracle happened for me. If you can get a loved one to treatment, the Lord can do some pretty awesome things in that time. And I mean, I ran away like twice in the first 3 weeks. I threatened my parents, all sorts of things. I was like walking in a snowstorm to get out of there. So I didn't want to be there. But what happened for me is the Lord touched me, and I felt the Spirit because I was in a safe place. And I was surrounded by people that had a testimony of recovery and of God, and they talked about it. And I was allowed to be myself. I could have put aside my shame and just be real for the first time, and not feel judged and not feel bad and feel accepted and loved.
What I'm hearing is that there was the pain of the consequences that you finally came to yourself, as the scriptures talk about. And for us as family members, if we can help the pain from consequence happen, that's, if we need to help them get into treatment, that's what we want to do. So,
right. Well, you need to be mindful too, because everything we're saying, we can't give any of advice, because sometimes, like I was walking with a friend today, if your loved one has addiction, plus mental illness, plus maybe lost their father or something hard's happened, they're going to need a lot of encouragement and a lot of support. Mm-hmm. And those of you who are new, we encourage our family members to try to attend at least 3 regular 12-step meetings with the addicts, like AA, NA, go. That's how we had back then. And when our sons came for the very first time with us, I never thought they would share. They were in active heroin addiction. But hearing all the other addicts in the room they're so tender, and they're so sweet and vulnerable and authentic and honest. And the spirit in the room was so strong that our boys actually were able to feel safe and open up and share all their secrets. Stuff I'd been wanting to hear for 10 years, came out. And so it's just a miracle, really, truly. Russ, I'd like to hear, we haven't heard from you for a while. So I wanted to hear your perspective on that.
We need to wrap it up in about 3 or 4 minutes, but Russ, got a question for you. There's family members that have said, like we did, to their addicts, can't you see what's going on? Just stop. Don't you get it? Just stop drinking or stop using it, screwing up your life, your relationship. Just stop. Can you, in a nutshell, talk about the midbrain and the frontal cortex, how it is a brain disease and how it takes a person's will away so they don't have a choice anymore, and treatment then brings that back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think and we've touched on it tonight. A few of us have touched on that, how the need for the drug or the alcohol literally becomes a survival compulse, or compelled. That's the word. When we're in our addiction to do that. And I can, again, just speak for me that there was a lot of that desire of like, why can't I just quit? And it almost like poured gas on my shame fire, if that makes sense too, of like, oh my gosh, like I have, all this desire, all these reasons to stop, all these consequences, yet my behavior continues. That's why, and I don't want to say everybody needs residential treatment, because I don't think that's true, but I know I did. I know I for sure did. A structured setting where I didn't have hardly any options, rock bottom, the timing is important, where I had some time to sober up. And that's where, and I agree with Lindsay too, like I truly don't think I wanted it at first. It was just the best option, and that started to shift over time, fairly quickly over a week or two. But being in that midbrain part of our brain is where the fight and flight is. It's our survival mode, and drinking and using becomes a survival tactic. I don't know if that allows any of you family members out there maybe a little understanding and maybe some patience, but also some urgency to maybe put in some of those boundaries that's going to help your addict get some help sooner.
You know, that what you just talked about surely helped us.
Thank you, Russ.
I was just so mad that the boys wouldn't stop. But literally what happens is that the drug of choice affects the midbrain, which is our fight or flight, which shuts down our frontal cortex, our values, our morals, our ability to choose. It shuts that down. And in treatment and recovery, it turns that back on so they can have their will again. So very well said, Russ. So appreciative of that. We got to wrap it up. Any quick thing, honey, that you have?
Yes, I want to just make sure you're aware of these resources. So every week we have, soon will be 7 online family education classes each week. They're free. They're on Zoom. If you're not getting my weekly emails, just email me and we'll get you in the system. And you can always unsubscribe anytime, but you'll get our weekly emails. And our educators, we collaborate, and you'll get handouts and videos and so much information. Like I said, we have a great workbook. We have a family addiction recovery podcast. Now, Lane, I know you fell in love with Lane tonight. He is the best. He's episode 3 of our family education podcast, and it'll be going on to our Instagram on Friday. And so it's called Addiction Recovery Mom, and you'll be able to hear the podcast with Lane and Dave Belt. Incredible stories. You will love it. We also have these webinars that you can go, if you go to renaissanceranchutah.com, and click the family education stuff, you'll see all the podcast webinars, classes, the schedule, the Zoom schedules there. It's all right there for you, or the Facebook or Addiction Recovery Mom.
Do you want to give them your email? So
Christine at renaissanceranch.com.
It's CHRIST.
And it looks like everybody wants Deanna to sponsor them. So Deanna, you're going to be in, but we love you guys. And thank you so much for showing up tonight. And it means so much to your loved ones to know that they're not alone and that they have support. And again, the research indicates that if the loved ones get into recovery or just become knowledgeable and kind of engage, it increases the likelihood of long-term sobriety for your addicted loved one by 80%. And we see that, and we're a witness of that. And some of us say 100%. If we see the family members are really getting involved, it just helps the family so much. So
everybody, thank you so much for attending and being engaged.
Have anything to say? Do you guys have
any last comments that you guys would like to share?
Anything we missed?
So appreciate you guys. Lindsay, thank you for being so vulnerable and open. Deanna, preparing so well. Lane, for looking so handsome. And Russ, for giving your heart, man. We felt your heart. All of you guys, thank you so much. We love you.
Thank you. And join us in June. We're going to have we're going to work on conflict resolution with a professional mediator. We're going to have a marriage and family therapist. We're going to have our awesome ranch staff. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you next week on our family classes.
We'll get those emails out.
And we'll get that done. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Do you want to stop the recording?